If you were dropped into the caveman's world right now, how long would you last? Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of a dense forest. The air is cold, your breath hangs in mist, and the only sound is the distant cry of some unknown creature. You have nothing. No clothes to protect your skin, no tools to cut or hunt, no fire to warm your body. You are, in every sense, naked against nature. This isn't a survival show where a backpack magically appears with a knife and flint. This isn't a game where respawn is an option. This is life, raw and merciless, as it was tens of thousands of years ago for our caveman ancestors. Could you, an ordinary modern human, survive? Would instinct kick in, or would panic take over? The ground beneath you offers roots, the trees fruits, the rivers fish, but without knowledge or tools. How do you even begin? Stay tuned, because today we'll peel back the layers of comfort, step into the wilderness of prehistory, and discover whether the modern human, spoiled by smartphones and supermarkets, could stand a chance against the brutal test of living as a caveman. This is not just a survival story. It's a question of what makes us human. The first moment of awareness in a prehistoric wilderness would be unlike anything you have ever experienced, because in an instant, every layer of comfort and safety you've ever known is stripped away, and you are forced to see yourself for what you truly are, a fragile, hairless primate standing in a world that owes you nothing. The air is colder than you expected because you've never felt it raw against your bare skin for more than a few minutes. And the ground beneath your feet is uneven, littered with stones and thorns that cut without mercy. You shiver, not just from the temperature, but from the shock of vulnerability, because this is not camping. This is not a survival reality show where a crew waits behind the cameras with blankets and medical kits. This is existence reduced to its most primal state. And you are naked in every sense of the word. The instinct to move, to find shelter, kicks in almost immediately, and yet the problem is that modern humans are trained for convenience, not creativity. You look around for a cave, a hollow tree, anything that resembles four walls and a roof, because even the simplest overhang of rock suddenly becomes a fortress in your imagination. Our caveman ancestors understood this innately. Survival did not begin with fire or tools. It began with cover, wind, rain, predators. These were not inconveniences. They were killers. The first humans often sought natural shelters long before they knew how to build them. You would have to do the same, stumbling through terrain that scratches your legs, cuts your feet, and bruises your body, all while panic wrestles with reason in your head. And what if no cave is nearby? You might scrape together a crude nest of leaves, branches, and grass, but with no knife to cut or rope. To bind, everything is clumsy, temporary, and weak, collapsing under its own weight or blowing apart in the night. Even the act of carrying branches tears at your skin, leaving welts and cuts that sting with sweat. The absurdity becomes clear. Without tools, your bare hands are your only instruments, and they are poor ones. Fingernails split, blisters form, and the pain alone slows you down. But then, as night falls, the real terror begins. Cold. Your body, accustomed to clothing, begins to lose heat rapidly because human skin is a poor shield against nature. Hypothermia does not wait politely. It creeps in silently, beginning with shivers, then confusion, then numbness. One sleepless night could be enough to push you into exhaustion and sickness. You tell yourself you need fire. You've seen movies. You know the theory. You imagine rubbing sticks together, summoning a spark from friction, maybe blowing gently until a flame flickers to life. But here is the reality. Even trained survivalists often fail to start fire with friction, especially without dry tinder, especially when cold and exhausted, especially with hands already raw and blistered. It is not a romantic image of human triumph. It is a brutal, frustrating exercise that ends with nothing but broken sticks and bloodied palms. Our ancestors who discovered fire did not stumble upon it in a single day. They observed lightning strikes. They stole flames from natural wildfires. They spent generations learning how to replicate it. You, in this moment, are centuries too late to the discovery party. The bitter irony is that your survival depends on something you cannot conjure, and so you face the night not as a master of flame, but as a shivering animal. The sounds around you amplify in the darkness. Rustles in the grass, the snap of a branch, the distant cry of something you cannot name. Every noise is a predator in your imagination, and without fire to push them back, you are right to be afraid. In nature, fire was not only warmth, it was weapon, shield, and symbol. Without it, you are defenseless, prey in a world where sharp teeth and claws rule the night. And yet, beneath all of this physical suffering, there is something deeper. The crushing realization of how dependent you truly are on technology. A simple lighter, a match, a blanket, things so ordinary in your real life would be the difference between life and death here. And with none of it, your brain races through impossible choices. Do you try to stay awake, guarding yourself against predators, knowing exhaustion will overwhelm you? Do you curl into a ball and hope the night passes, risking hypothermia? Do you climb a tree, risking a fall? There are no good answers, only survival gambles. And this, perhaps, is the true beginning of life as a caveman. Not invention, not triumph, not mastery, but fear, cold, hunger, and the desperate hope of making it to dawn. It is the naked beginning, and most of us, despite everything we think we know, would not survive it. Stay tuned, because if you think the first night is impossible, wait until you face the endless hunger of day 2. If you manage to stumble through that first merciless night, cold, trembling, terrified, but alive, the dawn doesn't bring relief. It brings a new and even more relentless enemy, hunger. At first, it's just a dull, gnawing ache in your stomach, but by midday, it's a roaring distraction, pulling every thought away from reason and toward desperation, because unlike thirst, which can sometimes be quenched quickly with a stream or rain, food is elusive, food is dangerous, and food is never guaranteed. You look around at the forest, at the bushes heavy with leaves, at the scattered fungi dotting the ground, and you realize you don't know what's safe, because in nature, most things that look edible are not. Berries gleam like candy, but some hide toxins strong enough to paralyze. Mushrooms sprout like little miracles, but carry poisons that destroy your liver, and even roots that seem harmless can ferment in your gut and leave you retching for days. Our caveman ancestors born into this wild classroom carried knowledge carved by generations of trial and error, grandmothers teaching which plants healed, which killed, which could be boiled to remove bitterness, which could be roasted to unlock calories. You have no such guidance. You have Google in your world, supermarkets in your town. But here, you have only blind chance, and blind chance in prehistory is often fatal. So you look to the animals, thinking maybe you can mimic them, but even that is risky. Birds can eat berries that would poison you, deer can digest leaves your stomach cannot, and insects can crawl over things that would sicken your fragile body. Meat seems like salvation, the thought of a rabbit or fish sparking visions of protein and strength, but how do you catch it? With no spear, no net, not even a sharpened stick, you are slower than every animal around you. The rabbit hears your clumsy steps long before you get close. The fish dart away as soon as your shadow falls across the water. Hunting is not an option, not yet. Scavenging, maybe. That half-rotten carcass left by wolves, buzzing with flies, still has meat on it. But can you stomach it raw? Can you fight off the disgust long enough to chew? And if you do, will it sustain you or poison you with parasites? Fire would change everything. It would sterilize, soften, make things edible that would otherwise kill. But as you learned in the cold of night, fire is a dream, not a reality. Not yet. And so the cruel paradox emerges. You are burning calories with every step, with every attempt at foraging, and yet you replace almost none of them. Your body, designed for abundance, now begins to consume itself, pulling energy from fat, then from muscle, weakening you day by day. Weakness slows you, and slowness is death in a world where predators never skip a meal. Hunger is not just physical, it's psychological. It drives you to irrational choices, to eating whatever you find regardless of risk, to pushing your body beyond exhaustion just for the hope of a few bites. Imagine yourself kneeling by a stream, digging frantically at the muddy bank. pulling up slimy worms with trembling fingers, forcing them down raw because the thought of another hour without food is unbearable. It sounds grotesque now, but in the wilderness, it's survival. And yet, even if you find a few worms, a handful of berries, the occasional grub beneath bark, the math doesn't work. Your intake never matches your output, and day by day, you wither. Our ancestors solved this problem with tools: sharp stone flakes to butcher, woven nets to trap fish, wooden spears hardened by fire to stab. Without them, you are locked out of the real calorie sources, scraping crumbs from a banquet you cannot attend. Starvation is slow, but it's merciless. And in the wilderness, weakness is an invitation, because when you stumble, when you hesitate, when you can't run fast enough, you don't just starve, you get eaten. Stay tuned, because hunger isn't the only predator here. The wilderness has eyes, claws, and teeth, and they're already watching. If hunger gnaws at you by day, then fear stalks you by night, because in the world you've been thrown into, you are not the hunter. You are the hunted, a soft-bodied, slow-footed intruder in an ecosystem built on teeth and claws. Picture this. The forest falls silent, the crickets stop, the birds vanish into the canopy, and suddenly every hair on your neck rises because something is watching. In your modern world, the dark is an inconvenience, a flick of a light switch away from banishment. But here, darkness is a living thing, filled with eyes that glimmer just beyond your vision. Wolves, lions, hyenas, great cats, these were not abstract creatures in our ancestors' lives. They were neighbors, competitors, executioners. Imagine crouching in your crude shelter, your stomach empty, your body trembling, when you hear the soft pad of paws in the dirt outside. Your heart races, your breath quickens, and instinct screams at you to run. But run where? You are slower than almost everything that hunts. Your bare feet clumsy against roots and stones, your skin tearing at the first scrape of a branch. Climbing seems like salvation, but your weak hands can barely grip the bark, and predators like leopards are better climbers than you will ever be. The brutal truth is that without fire, without weapons, without a tribe, you are at the bottom of the food chain. Our ancestors learned this quickly. They survived not by courage, but by cunning, waiting for predators to finish their kill. Snatching scraps from the edges, learning to move silently, to work in numbers, to guard each other as they slept. Alone, you cannot mimic this. Every step you take is loud, every movement careless, and the animals hear you long before. You hear them. Even if they don't attack, you are competition. And in the wild, competition is driven off or destroyed. And predators are not your only enemy. Snakes coil unseen beneath the leaves, striking before you notice. Spiders inject venom, insects bite and infect, and every scratch becomes a doorway for bacteria that can fester and kill. In the modern world, a cut is an annoyance patched with a bandage. Here, it can swell, rot, and end you in days. The wilderness doesn't need a lion to kill you. It can do it with a mosquito. And then there's the psychological war. Every sound becomes amplified. Every shadow hides menace. And your mind, already weakened by hunger and exhaustion, begins to betray you. Fear floods your system, adrenaline surges, your heart pounds endlessly, and while it sharpens you for a moment, it burns your limited energy faster, pushing your body toward collapse. Our ancestors eventually tamed fire, and with it, they tamed fear, using its light and heat to push predators back, to create the illusion of dominance. But you, alone in the wild, without flame, are nothing but a whisper of prey. Even if no predator strikes you down tonight, the knowledge that they could is enough to wear you thin, to steal your confidence, to leave you trembling in the dawn light. And so, teeth and claws surround you, not just in the animals you see, but in the shadows of your own imagination, waiting to tear you apart. Stay tuned, because even if you escape the beasts, the most dangerous predator of all might just be your own mind. And still, after the cold, after the hunger, after the fear of teeth in the dark, and the crushing weight of silence, there remains one fragile, stubborn ember that refuses to die. The spark of human ingenuity, the single trait that lifted our species from trembling prey to the architects of civilization. And though you stand here, stripped bare, bleeding, starving, delirious, that spark is still within you, waiting to ignite. It begins with frustration, with clumsy hands bashing stones together, not as strategy but as anger, and suddenly a shard breaks free, razor sharp, gleaming in your palm, and in that moment, a tool is born. You scratch bark with it, slice meat from a scavenged carcass, discover that the world can be shaped rather than endured. You strike rocks again and again, sparks flash and vanish, but you know now that fire is possible. You can feel it, and with patience, with repetition, maybe even with luck, one day those sparks will catch, and the first flame will bloom, fragile yet defiant, turning night into day and predator into shadow. You twist branches into crude bindings, weave grass into a mat, stack stone upon stone to build walls against the wind. And though your efforts are weak, though your body screams for food, though your mind trembles on the edge of collapse, each small victory is a step out of helplessness and into mastery. This is what our ancestors discovered, that the wild could be studied, copied, bent, and remade. That human survival is not brute strength, but relentless adaptation, not instinct, but invention, not surrender, but persistence. Most who stand here alone would die before that ember bursts into flame, but even in the dying, the attempt itself is proof of what makes us human. The refusal to remain prey, the refusal to bow to chance, the determination to wrestle survival from a world that never wanted to give it. And if you endure long enough to see that first tool, that first spark, that first fire, then for the first time, the wilderness must bow to you. For if ingenuity is the spark, then persistence is the flame. And it was persistence, generation after generation refusing to give in, that transformed fragile wanderers into masters of their world. Because once the first tools were sharpened, once the first fires were kept alive, once the first shelters were more than hollow caves, the human story shifted from barely surviving to slowly, relentlessly conquering. Imagine the first time a group of trembling, half-starved nomads carried fire from one camp to another, guarding the embers through wind and rain, huddling close as predators circled but never dared cross the glow. That was the first time fear itself began to fear us. With sharp stones, they butchered more efficiently. With spears, they pushed back against claws. With language, they shared mistakes so they did not need to be repeated. And with unity, they turned weakness into strength. Because while one human alone is frail, a tribe of humans with tools, with fire, with memory, becomes unstoppable. Slowly, the odds shifted. Hunger became feasts. Caves became villages, fear of the night became stories told around flames, and the great beasts that once ruled the darkness fell one by one to coordinated hunts. What began as desperation became invention. What began as clumsy accidents became technology. What began as survival became dominance. And that, more than anything, is the arc of our species. To take a hostile world that should have crushed us and instead bend it to our will. And though you, cast naked into that same world, might not last more than a few days, the truth is that in you, in all of us, lies the blood of those who did, who fought, who adapted, who endured long enough not just to survive, but to rise. And it is their victories, not our comforts, that explain why the human story did not end in the jaws of lions, but spread across every continent, across oceans, across the very face of the earth. So when we ask the question, no tools, no clothes, no fire, could you survive as a caveman? The answer is almost painfully clear. Alone, thrown naked into the wilderness, most of us would not last long at all because our bodies are soft, our instincts dulled, our knowledge borrowed, and the wild is merciless to those who hesitate. But that is not the end of the story, because survival was never meant to be a solo act, never meant to be a contest of one human against the raw fury of nature. It was always a collective endeavor, generations stacked upon generations, each mistake teaching the next, each death leaving behind knowledge that carried forward until the fragile primates who once cowered in the dark began to master the night, the hunt, the very world around them. The reason you would fail today is because they already fought the battle and won, because they already suffered so you would not have to, because they already transformed lightning into fire, stone into blade, fear into story, and story into memory, until everything you take for granted, your roof, your food, your clothing, the warmth of your home became the inheritance of their persistence. Could you survive if stripped back to their world? Likely not, but could they survive in yours? Without language, without culture, without centuries of accumulated knowledge? Just as unlikely. The truth is not that one is weaker than the other, but that together they form a single unbroken chain, stretching from the first trembling sparks of firelight to the glowing cities of today. Each link proof that while the individual is fragile, humanity united is indestructible. Naked, we falter; united, we endure. And it is that endurance, that refusal to surrender, that ancient ember of ingenuity still burning in your blood, that means even in the cruelest wilderness, even with no tools, no clothes, and seemingly no chance, there is always, always a spark.